तवगतामृतं तप्तजीवनं कविभिरीडितं कल्मषापहं शरवणमङ्गलं श्रीमदाततं भुवि गणन्ति हुरिराज. Your words are like nectar, bringing life to scorched souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome, everyone, to our class on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We're starting a new chapter, tonight chapter 16, with the Devotees of Dakshineswar Part 2, and it's Sunday, December 9th, 1883. Sri Ramakrishna was seated on the small couch in his room with Adhar, Manomohan, Rakal, M, Harish, and other devotees. By now, we know all of these people. Adhar was the deputy magistrate looking for the big job, who had come to Sri Ramakrishna not too much earlier, but became very, very close and very dear to him in a very short time. And we see Thakur going to his house and other things. Manomohan and Rakal were brothers-in-law. And it was actually through Manomohan that Rakal Swami Brahmananda came to meet Sri Ramakrishna. And Manomohan was also related to Ramchandra Datta. So there are a lot of interconnections among the devotees, even family connections. And of course, and Harish used to stay with Sri Ramakrishna for some time, off and on. He was married, but he was drawn to monastic life, and other devotees. It was about 2:00 in the afternoon. The master was describing to them the exalted state of Sri Chaitanya. Now, M is going to make a comment later that is very much appropriate, that I think that half the time when Thakur wanted to explain his own state of mind, he would talk about Chaitanya's state of mind. And all of the descriptions that he gives will be things that apply to him as well. So he says, Master, Chaitanya experienced three states of mind. First, the conscious state, when his mind dwelled on the gross and the subtle. Second, the semi-conscious state, when his mind entered the causal body and was absorbed in the bliss of divine intoxication. Third, the inmost state, when his mind was merged in the great cause. Now, we have lots of connections here with the two doctrines of the different bodies, the Sthula Sharir, the Sukshma Sharir, and the Karan Sharir, the gross, the subtle, and the causal body. And then we'll get with the five koshas also. But beyond the causal body is Mahakarana, is the great cause, or if we think of it in terms of the different states of consciousness, Turiya, or the ultimate merging in the divine reality. So the conscious state, the mind dwelt on the gross and the subtle. That means awareness of the physical body, and of course the mind and everything. Second, the semi-conscious state, when the mind entered the causal body. So this means that there's not even awareness of internal thought. Somehow it's almost our nirvikalpa samadhi, but something like that. But then the third, which goes even beyond that. So that'll be really the mind completely lost and in the great cause. So this will be that the highest type of samadhi. So now we have the three bodies here. And Thakur says this agrees very well with the five koshas or sheaths described in the Vedanta. This is a teaser. I'm not going to say too much about this because this is my topic for Sunday, And probably next it'll be a two-part topic, because I love this theory of the five Panchakosha doctrine, the five sheaths. And just to give a little foretaste of what it will be, the doctrine of the five koshas, five sheaths, which Thakur talks about in terms of the onion, and peeling the onion. Uh, it, it it's appropriate and helpful in so many different levels, with regard to this personality of the individual, with regard to this analysis, with regard to trying to find the real self or the ego within, uh, to find this relationship between the superimposed aspects, false identification, so many different things. Even when the jiva leaves the body at the time of death, and casting off the annamaya kosha, but maybe keeping this manomaya kosha. All of these things are can be explained in terms of this idea that we're covered by five different layers, and the innermost will be this anandamaya kosha, which is something like the subconscious mind, and the karana sharira. And then we have the vijnanamaya kosha, manomaya kosha, which will be like the subtle body, sukshma sharira. And then the pranamaya kosha and the annamaya kosha, this body and life and everything. And that'll be the stula sharira. That'll be this physical body. And uh, so these two doctrines, they dovetail. They're almost identical. Only one is divided into three, and the other is divided into five. And they will correspond to the three states of consciousness: waking state, dreamless, sleep. So they all dovetail, they all work together. And of course, the Turiya state, which is beyond all of them. So Thakur says this agrees very well with the five koshas or sheaths described in the Vedanta. The gross body corresponds to the annamaya kosha and the pranamaya kosha, the subtle body to the manomaya kosha and the vijnanamaya kosha, and the causal body to the anandamaya kosha. Ananda is the sheath of bliss, because somehow it's the closest. It's if we think of these different layers and levels, it is the closest to the center and reflects the bliss of Brahman more than the others. But it's also the one that's characterized by tamas and darkness, because it's the state of deep sleep, and when we're not aware of the mind is not functioning in an ordinary way. The Mahakarana, the great cause, is beyond the five sheaths. When Chaitanya's mind merged in that, he would go into samadhi. This is called the nirvikalpa or jada samadhi. So if we go back, the three states of mind, the first will be when Chaitanya Deva or Thakur is aware of external things. The second, semi-conscious state, mind enters the causal body. So that'll be kind of bhava samadhi. There'll be bliss. There'll be some experience. And then the third, mind merged in the great cause, even is beyond any experience, because there's no I at all in that state. Savikalpa samadhi and nirvikalpa samadhi don't exactly correspond to the bhava samadhi and other types. This is on the according to the school of Patanjali's Raja Yoga, the Savikalpa Samadhi, there'll be some sense of individual awareness that I am having this experience, some sense of I, which is very pure, which is not identified with any external thing. The best way I find of understanding this at all, because this is just all theoretical with us until we get some experience, is Swamiji's Hima Samadhi. So he says in that state, there's just the flow of I, just pure, I know that I exist. And then even that I, sense of I, disappears. That'll be the nirvikalpa samadhi. In this bhava samadhi, there's all sorts of things that can be going on, all types of experiences and visions of gods and goddesses. And Thakur, he'll be talking to the Divine Mother, she'll be talking to him, he'll have all sorts of visions and things, but no external awareness. The mind is gone from this physical plane, not connected to the senses. It's in some divine realm. Don't know exactly uh, how we explain that, but that's the experience. Generally, with those following the path of devotion, that they'll be the ones who will have this type of bhava samadhi. So most of the time when it says Thakur went into samadhi, it's bhava samadhi. And then afterwards he'll say, do you know what I saw in that state? And he'll explain something like that. Of course, he would go into the highest type of samadhi from time to time. At one point, we know he was in that state for 6 months, more or less. And that after that, this is a period before all the devotees started coming. After that, it was hard for him to keep his mind away from that state. That he used to say most of the time he was in that nirvikalpa state. That the mind had the tendency to just go up and disappear into that ultimate reality. Then the devotees started coming. He made a great effort to keep his mind, hold it down to the world, so he could talk to people. And he used to say, enjoy the bliss of bhakti and bhakta, the company of the devotees and devotion. So, yeah, they correspond, but they're not identical. The bhava samadhi and sabikalpa samadhi. Sabikalpa, that means there's something going on in the mind. The mind, there's some functioning of it, but it's not connected to the senses, or it's not the ordinary thinking of the mind, but some sense of I, some awareness that I'm having this experience. But this nirvikalpa samadhi, the salt doll is one with the ocean at that point. There's no way to explain, even if one comes back from that, no one to explain what takes place in that state. Only the feeling of joy is there, tremendous joy. So we know it's not just a blank state. There's something that very, and not just feeling of joy, but transformation takes place. So we know that this is the ultimate state. So this is a little bit unusual, talking about Chaitanya Deva and nirvikalpa or jada samadhi. Those following the path of devotion, they'll be more interested in this bhava samadhi and having a vision of Krishna in his case and things like that. While conscious of the outer world, Chaitanya sang the name of God. While in the state of partial consciousness, he danced with the devotees. And while in the inmost state of consciousness, he remained absorbed in samadhi, to himself. Is the master hinting at the different states of his own mind? These are rhetorical questions. This means that M is convinced that this is what he's doing, but he's stating it as a question. There is much similarity between Chaitanya and the master. So I think that not only is M right, he's hinting at that, but I think this is his way of doing it, his way of explaining to them what his different states of consciousness are by talking about Chaitanya Deva. They were so similar in so many different ways with this udipana, this being able to see something that triggers something else, with this tremendous vyakulata, the longing, feeling of separation, longing for realization. They were very, very similar in many ways. Master. Chaitanya was divine love incarnate. He came to earth to teach people how to love God. One achieves everything when one loves God. There is no need of hatha yoga. Now, this divine love incarnate, we have a couple of different theories about the avatar. One is almost a historical imperative idea that the forces of history make it necessary for the divine to incarnate because of dharma and adharma. There's one idea. And the other is that they come as a living example and teach us how to love God. This is more along the devotional path, and I think Sri Ramakrishna also prefers that interpretation. That we don't hear him talking too much about this idea in Gita. Whenever there's too much adharma, that the avatar takes birth, but this idea that they come to teach people how to love God and to set that example, to give us that mold that we can mold our lives within. This is how we feel, of course, about Thakur's coming, and it seems to be the way he understood it also. Then Hatha Yoga. Now, we know of our Hatha Yoga because of all the asanas and health benefits and everything. In Sri Ramakrishna's day, we have to know the context. There were people who they become fanatics about these things. It wasn't that they were doing it just to have a good health and they could sit for a long time and they did their meditation. This was their full-time, almost profession, and doing all sorts of strange things, swallowing the cloth and taking all sorts of things like that, and with the goal of getting some type of siddhis or powers or something. So when Thakur speaks negatively about the Hatha Yoga, we shouldn't take it to mean that we won't get any benefit from doing these asanas, because even many of our monks in the order, they'll do some of these just to keep good health. And of course, asana is one of the limbs of Raja Yoga, that we want to be able to keep the body in good shape so that we can sit comfortably for a long period of time. So there's no harm in practicing some of these things for the sake of health, but the goal of life is not just to have a healthy body. It has to be secondary to spiritual practice. So the devotee asks, "Sir, what is Hatha Yoga like?" Master, a man practicing Hatha Yoga dwells a great deal on his body. See, there was one Hatha Yogi who used to come and used to stay in Dakshineswar during this period. And who was it? Was it Harish? Huh? Somebody was, huh? No, someone who was very devoted to him was trying to collect money for him. Huh? Krishna Kishore's son. Yeah, and he used to take opium and milk. That was his diet, so something like that. So, and he did some strange things and wasn't really a spiritual aspirant. So that was Thakur's experience with these Hatha Yogis.
Baba was also Hatha Yogi, right?
Bhavari Baba, I don't know. I mean, he definitely won't fall under this class of Hatha Yogi. He may have known, he may have been expert in doing those things also, but he was a very, very sincere, yeah, and highly realized soul. Yeah.
The Sankhya Yoga school, spiritual practice.
Yeah, this of course belongs to the Sankhya Yoga school because it somehow falls under the asana, the Ashtanga Yoga. But it became a science unto its own self. What is it? Hatha Yoga? Deep. Oh, Bhavari Baba. Oh, I don't know that much about him. So he was more of a yogi according to that system, huh? Yeah. Well, we know that he was I think he was a lawyer, huh? A barrister, something like that, earlier, and he lived in a house that had a basement. It was half a cave. It wasn't like he lived in a cave. It was the cellar. Uh, I've never been there, but I know people have gone to visit. Ghazipur is not far from Benares, and towards the end of his life, he wouldn't meet people or talk to anybody. He would talk from inside. And Swamiji, of course, we know when and spent a long time with him, and we hear that he kept a picture of Sri Ramakrishna near his bed. And there are a couple of stories. I've told this story before that Swamiji heard this from one sadhu that once a thief went in to steal things from Bhavari Baba, and Bhavari Baba saw him, so he started to run away and he dropped some of the things. So Bhavari Baba, he grabbed them and ran after the thief to give them to him. And the thief thought that he wanted to, give him a thrashing, to give them to him. And he became so overwhelmed by his dispassion and love and everything that he renounced the world and became a sadhu. So Swamiji asked the sadhu, how did you hear this story? How do you know about that? And he said, I am that sadhu. So he actually met the person who did that. And he had lots of stories about Bhavari Baba. He was very, very highly respected. He's the one, when he was bitten by a snake? And they asked what happened. He said, a message from my beloved had come to me. So he was considered a very great soul. So a man practicing Hatha Yoga dwells a great deal on his body. He washes his intestines by means of a bamboo tube through his anus. He draws ghee and milk through his sexual organ. He learns how to manipulate his tongue by performing exercises. He sits in a fixed posture and now and then levitates. All these are actions of prana. A magician was performing his feats when his tongue turned up and clove to the roof of his mouth. Immediately his body became motionless. People thought he was dead. He was buried and remained many years in the grave. After a long time, the grave somehow broke open. Suddenly the man regained consciousness of the world and cried out, come delusion, come confusion. All laughed. All these are actions of prana. These are the footnote. This is what the magicians say when performing their feats in order to cast a spell on the spectators. Anyhow, Thakur's point is that they're not making spiritual progress. They're not getting any type of realization through this, that it's all the play of prana, and that they may get some powers and things like that, but it won't be helpful in spiritual life. It can be harmful, because just as we read in the chapter on siddhis, that these things, people get attached to them, and they get attached to the body, and they lose sight of the real goal. So there can be dangerous things. But not our normal Hatha Yoga that people do. So don't think there's anything wrong with that. Sri Ramakrishna was standing in the road by the side of the Nahabat. He was on his way to his room, having come from the pine grove. He saw M seated on the veranda of the Nahabat, behind the fence, absorbed in meditation. Master, hello, you are here. You will get results very soon. Now you can imagine how M felt. Just try to picture how M felt. Here he was sitting there in meditation, and he'll hear something, open his eyes, and hear these words from Sri Ramakrishna. You will get results very soon. If you practice a little, then someone will come forward to help you. Of course, that means Sri Ramakrishna himself. M looked up at the master, startled. He remained sitting on the floor. Master, the time is ripe for you. The mother bird does not break the shell of the egg until the right time arrives. What I told you is indeed your ideal. Now, this is December 9th, 1883. I think M goes back and comes again, but this is the one time when he spent a long period, 3 weeks or something, with Sri Ramakrishna, the only time that he really had the solid period when he stayed with him. Kashipur, of course, he spent a lot of time. He would spend nights there and everything. But this was a very, very important period in M's life. Everything got solidified, I think, during this one period. This, of course, is over the Christmas break. They all would get, because it was under the British. So that would be the time when the schools were closed and businesses were closed and everything. Now, what is M's ideal? Thakur gives hints every once in a while. Sometimes M will say that he likes a little bit this formless God, this infinite absolute Brahman. At the same time, I think he likes this servant-master relationship and the mother-child, because he was very much attached to his mother who died. Very much attached to his mother. At one time he asked, can he meditate on his mother? So, uh, and whatever Thakur told him, that of course is secret. That he won't divulge, and Thakur won't divulge. But what I told you is indeed your ideal. Sri Ramakrishna again mentioned to him his spiritual ideal, master. And spiritual ideal can take different forms. Spiritual ideal we can like to feel God dwells within as our very self, and at the same time have the mother-child relationship, master-servant relationship. It's possible. It doesn't have to be a monolithic one thing, because we have different moods at different times. Master, it is not necessary for all to practice great austerity, but I went through great suffering. Thakur did everything. So that he used to say, I've done it all, so you can just do a little bit. I've done all 16 on this, so you only have to, and to set an example. And because his realizations were so intense and everything, that he had to do all of that. I used to lie on the ground with my head resting on a mound for a pillow. I hardly noticed the passing of the days. I only called on God and wept, "Oh mother, oh mother." M had been visiting Sri Ramakrishna for the past 2 years. Since he had been educated along English lines, he had acquired a fondness for Western philosophy and science, and had liked to hear Keshav and other scholars lecture. M was one of many, many who came because of Keshav. And Keshav did a great service by actually through his humility. He was so much more famous than Sri Ramakrishna, and had such a big following. And he easily could have been very proud, but once he realized Thakur's greatness, uh, he really told everybody, "You go there. You want to see the real thing. You go to Sri Ramakrishna." He had articles written in their periodical and everything. So he played a very important role. He had true love. It was a very sweet relationship between Thakur and Keshav. Plus, M had a family connection through his wife with Keshav's family. A lot of connections uh, if we look at the relations and everything. Sri Ramakrishna would address him now and then as the Englishman. Since coming to Sri Ramakrishna, M had lost all relish for lectures and for books written by English scholars. The only thing that appealed to him now was to see the Master day and night, and hear the words that fell from his blessed lips. M constantly dwelt on certain of Sri Ramakrishna's sayings. Now, this is also very interesting in M's journal, that he used to categorize things. That some of the things that Sri Ramakrishna said, he would categorize as it's teachings, upadesha. Some things were commands. He would tell him, you do this or that, adesha. Then he had some things he called mahavakyas, that Thakur would say something that to him was as holy as the mahavakyas from the Upanishads. So he would categorize these different things. Little things that Thakur said that seem insignificant to us had tremendous meaning for him. The very first meeting when he left, what did Thakur say to him? Abaresho. It's a very insignificant thing. It's almost standard. If you don't say it to somebody, it's almost rude. Huh? It doesn't mean much. Come again. But for him, he said, aha, he told me to come again. I'll have to come again. He took that as something very, very significant. Then another very interesting thing. That first visit, was it a second visit, when M went back and he asked Ramakrishna, will there be any more singing tonight? He said no. And then he thought, but I'm going to someone's place, Balaram Bose, that you can go and meet me there. There'll be some bhajans and things like that and everything. So then M said, okay. Then he came back and he thought, this strange person's house, can I just show up? Something like that. And Thakur said to him, just mention my name, take my name. And for M, another thing that just to repeat the name Ramakrishna, that is like a mantra. He took that as something with a great significance. So M was such a sensitive, thoughtful soul, and this relationship between the two of them was so beautiful that really, of all the relationships, there's some special ones, of course, Narendra, Rakal, but I think M's relationship with Sri Ramakrishna has to be considered one of those very, very special relationships.
Do we know whether they have captured these categories somewhere?
Yeah, uh, Swami Prabhupanandaji's book, huh? Which one is it? You remember? Anyhow, there are books. There's one book just on M that was put out by I think that uh, the trust,
Maybe
something like that, where it talks about this and gives a list of. I have it somewhere. I can find it.
very slim Bengali volume.
There's also an English one.
It is more about Sri
There's
Ramakrishna.
more about Sri Ramakrishna. That's in English and Bengali, I think. Yeah. So yeah, these things are available. Not a full list. Uh, Swami Prabhupanandaji, uh, he was a master at getting hold of things that were hard to get hold of. And the family of M guarded these journals with their life. It was very hard to, anyhow, somehow he managed to get a hold of them. And he wrote a couple of books, this Antilila, about the final days, the things that he found in the journal that M never wrote, that he never put in. They were very cryptic and everything, but he could make out somehow. So he wrote did a lot of, he was a great, well, is a great researcher and historian. Swami Prabhupada, the wonderful Swami.
Antulila is in Bengali.
Yeah, Antolila, Antya, yeah, Lila, about the final, the Kashipur period. That's not much of that is not included because a couple of reasons. One, probably Sri Ramakrishna for long periods of time didn't say anything because he couldn't speak. The doctor told him not to speak. And then second thing was it was so painful for them to see him in that condition that probably was too painful for him to even write about it. And it was afraid that wouldn't other people would feel pain to hear about how much he suffered and everything. So a lot of it is not in here. So M constantly dwelt on certain of Sri Ramakrishna's sayings. The master had said, one can certainly see God through the practice of spiritual discipline. And again, the vision of God is the only goal of human life. Now, this first one can see God through the practice of spiritual discipline. Thakur talks about the sadhana siddha, but it's a very funny thing that ultimately he'll say, and all the great teachers will say, that nothing can give us God realization except for grace. But we can't get it without sadhana. We have to do that in order to get that grace, unless we're born with very special types of samskaras. So we have to do our spiritual practice. This was the emphasis that Thakur gave, knowing that grace will have to be there.
Thakur himself says in one place, grace also has to be deserved.
Yes, this grace we deserved, and we have to be ready for it. We have to be able to appreciate it. This is that effort to raise the sail. Grace is always there, but we have to do our part. And one very nice thing I just read, I'm always referring to Swami Buddheshanandaji because I'm reading his book. He says that those who have God realization through tremendous spiritual practice, they know that the all of the hard discipline, spiritual practice that they did are not even close to making us worthy to have that type of realization. That's why that feeling of grace comes. That whatever we get, we feel is so much more than we deserve or earn through our spiritual practice. But we have to do it. This is why I like Thakur's story of the bird and the mast of the ship, because if we just say, well, the bird We all know the story. The ship goes out to sea, and the bird tries to find land and flies in every direction, can't do it, and then practices self-surrender, just stays. If we say, well, the bird could have done it in the first place, that why go to all of that trouble? Bird could have simply said, yes, wherever the ship takes me, I'll be happy to go. But there are two things. One, uh, we have to try to do whatever we can to realize that uh, it's something beyond our power. We have to really uh, do our very best before we understand that uh, we we simply don't have the ability to kind of force this God realization. Whatever we do, uh, it seems like it won't be enough. We have that type of realization, but the flying in all directions, that bird has to become transformed through that. So it's not that we do our meditation day in and day out to finally realize that I'll never do it through meditation, that my mind is just as restless as it always was. Uh, that realization will come that some grace is necessary, but at the same time, some transformation takes place through all of that. Some tremendous love and devotion and conviction, all of these things come through that spiritual practice so that we're ready to renounce. We're ready to practice surrender, or that vyakulata comes, the tremendous longing for God comes. So something comes. So the spiritual discipline is necessary. Thakur never says, "Oh, you just sit and call on God." He says you can repeat God, God, God. It won't do anything. You can repeat Siddhi, 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 but unless you take it, Siddhi is intoxicant. You won't get that intoxication. So we have to do uh, as much spiritual practice as we can, understanding that ultimately grace is necessary. It'll be more than what we do, but we can't eliminate it. So this is true exactly. Of course, what he says, that one can certainly see God through the practice of spiritual discipline. That's a necessary factor, but ultimately, then grace will have to be there. And the vision of God is the only goal of human life. Now, only goal, people wonder about this. That means that having a family and having a career, these aren't goals of life. These are goals of life. This means the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal. Everything else, they're good goals and they're subsidiary, but they have to lead to this ultimate goal. Master to M. If you practice only a little, someone will come forward to tell you the right path. Observe the Ekadashi. Ekadashi uh, in Bengal is not so difficult. There's the fasting. There are all different levels of fasting. Some of the complete fast, nirjala, that they won't even take water. And then there are others that can take some luchis and fruits and things like that. And there are others, they can eat almost everything except rice. So all different ways of doing it. Thakur wasn't much in favor of uh, very harsh types of austerities and fasting, and especially for women, he didn't like to see them fast. But at least to do something that day, to a little bit of discipline is helpful. So for some reason, he told M. We don't find him telling this to anybody and everybody, but this was for M. Then he goes on. M must have just been in ecstasy. You are my very own, my relative. Otherwise, why should you come here so frequently? While listening to the kirtan, I had a vision of Rakal in the midst of Sri Krishna's companions in Vrindavan. Narendra belongs to a very high level. Hirananda, too, how childlike his nature is. This Hirananda will meet in Kashipur. We don't find, because he was a native of Sindh and lived there, but he did his college in Kolkata and was very close with Keshav, the member of the Brahmo Samaj, and would visit Sri Ramakrishna. And they had a beautiful relationship. Thakur loved him, he loved Thakur. And when he went back to Sindh. He was very highly educated, a lot of degrees and things, and ran several newspapers. He was very busy, had a family and everything. Yeah, Hirananda. Don't think he was a Swami Hirananda. That was just his name. But he made a special trip, came all that long distance, over 1,000 miles, to see Sri Ramakrishna in Kashipur. Thakur was so happy to see him, and he wanted to bring him there to Sindh to look after him and everything. And so they had a very nice relationship. And after Thakur passed away, whenever his Hirananda came, he became very, very friendly and close with Swamiji, with Narendra, and he would go to the Baranagar Mutt and meet with him there. And so he really became very close member of that circle, even though he lived so far away. And with Sindhi, it was from that part of India, close to the maybe even Pakistan in those days, in Lahore or Karachi, even. Hirananda too, how childlike his nature is. What a sweet disposition he has. I want to see him too. Of course, Thakur wants to see something will happen. So that desire was fulfilled later in Kashipur. Once I saw the companions of Chaitanya, not in a trance, but with these very eyes. Now, Thakur made a distinction between two different types of visions that he would have. The one was where he saw everything else. And he used to say the first type of vision he had like that was the vision of Sita. He was at near the Panchavati, and he sees a woman walking near him, very majestic and beautiful looking and everything, wondering where she came from, who is she? And then he sees that one of the monkeys jumps from the tree and rolls in front of her, as if making pranam, something like that. And then he realized he was seeing Sita. And he noticed her bracelets, the diamond cut, and had the same type made for Holy Mother later. So he used to say that that was his vision of that time. Most of the time, he would have visions. Of course, he'd lose all outer consciousness and then have some type of vision like that. He had that type of vision when he fell and broke his arm. And then he said, Mother's trying to tell me, don't have those visions anymore. See God dwelling in everyone with your eyes open. So anyhow, he said, once I saw the companions of Chaitanya, not in a trance, but with these very eyes. Formerly, I was in such an exalted state of mind that I could see all these things with my naked eyes, but now I see them in samadhi. So that'll be the Bhava, samadhi. I saw the companions of Chaitanya with these naked eyes. I think I saw you there and Balaram too. Now, this is one of the only times that I can remember, and Thakur mentions it many times when he says, I think. There's somehow he doesn't remember, he's not quite sure that if he saw him, but he thinks he saw him there. And sometimes he said, I saw Balaram, and I think you too. So anyhow, what this means is that if M was a companion of Chaitanya Deva, that means that he comes with the avatar. That means he's an antaranga, the parshada, almost Ishvara Koti, we can say. Almost. These categories aren't so hard and fast that you either are or you aren't. We don't know about these things, but he saw that Balaram also, Balaram Bose, who we don't call an Ishvara Koti, but could still be part of this divine play. Leela Shahars, these companions in the Leela. You must have noticed that when I see certain people, I jump up with a start. Do you know why? A man feels that way when he sees his own people after a long time. Now remember, M was in deep meditation, and suddenly Sri Ramakrishna comes up and starts telling him all of these things. I used to pray to the mother crying, and how he remembers to write all of these things. It was an unbelievable memory that he had. Mother, if I do not find the devotees, I'll surely die. This is after all of his realizations, that he had this tremendous desire to find people to share these things with, who could understand them and appreciate them and spread them to others and put them into practice. He felt he had gotten this tremendous treasure. He wanted somebody to give them to. He would go up to the roof, the kuti, and yell out, come, where are you? Come, I'm waiting for you. When Rakal came, he said, "How cruel! Why did you make me wait so long?" Huh? He used to say things like that. So I used to pray to the mother, crying, "Mother, if I do not find the devotees, I'll surely die. Please bring them to me immediately." In those days, whatever desire rose in my mind would come to pass. I planted a tulsi grove in the Panchavati in order to practice japa and meditation. I wanted very much to fence it around with bamboo sticks. Soon afterwards, a bundle of bamboo sticks and some string were carried by the flood tide of the Ganges right in front of the Panchavati. A temple servant noticed them and joyfully told me. In that state of divine exaltation, I could no longer perform the formal worship. Thakur used to say that we reach a stage in spiritual life where things fall off. We don't decide. We don't say, "Okay, I've been doing puja every morning for so many years, and I do my japa every morning. Then I've done enough. Now I'll stop." What happens is we reach the stage where uh, either we can't do it anymore, or it's just superfluous because the mind is so absorbed in God all of the time. So he calls the first Vaidhi Bhakti and the other Anuraga. Raganuga Bhakti, he uses different names for it. But it just happens automatically. So in Sri Ramakrishna's case, it happened very early. He did the worship of Mother Kali for a few years. Then after his realization and everything, others had to take over for him, Ramlal, and he got other people to do it because it was just impossible at that point. So in that state of divine exaltation, I could no longer perform the formal worship. "Mother," I said, "who will look after me? I haven't the power to take care of myself. I want to listen only to talk about thee. I want to feed thy devotees. I want to give a little help to those whom I chance to meet. How will all that be possible, mother? Give me a rich man to stand by me. That is why Mathur Babu did so much to serve me." Thakur used to say that one after another, these Rasadhar, these people who were their role in this divine Leela was specifically to look after his needs, physical needs and everything. And he pointed out three of them. Who were they? So Mathur Babu, then Shambhu, Shambhu Malik, then Balaram Bose, and Surendra Hef. So the 3.5, something like that. Yeah. And it's funny that he always called Balaram Bose as very miserly, but he wasn't. I don't know. he used to say that for some reason. His problem was that his family was very wealthy, and they knew he would spend all of his money on Thakur, so they kept him on a tight leash. He got a small allowance, I think, and wasn't able to spend as much as he wanted, but he was very generous. I said further, "Certainly I shall not have any children, mother, but it is my desire that a boy with sincere love for God should always remain with me. Give me such a boy." That is the reason Rakal came here. Those whom I think of as my own are part and parcel of me. So he would have these visions ahead of time, and then when Rakal came, he saw that it was him. He had the vision, of course, of the great sage in samadhi before Swamiji came and recognized that this is him. Sometimes he would doubt, and sometimes he would test. So with Narendra, especially, that in Jadu Malik's house, how we touched him, asked him all of the questions that why did you come? What is your mission in life? How long will you live? All these different questions. And afterwards, I was satisfied that he gave me all the right answers. Swamiji didn't know he was giving answers. He was in some trance-like state, as if hypnotized, just by the touch. Thakur just touched. And Narendra, he said, "I'm not going to let this madman play these tricks with me anymore. That the first time he touched me and I lost consciousness, I'm not going to let it happen again. I'm going to be on my guard." The second that he touched him, he had no There's no possible way of withstanding that power, tremendous power that Thakur had. The master started again for the Panchavati, accompanied by M. No one else was with them. Sri Ramakrishna, with a smile, narrated to him various incidents of the past years of his life. Master, you see, one day I saw a strange figure covering the whole space from the Kali temple to the Panchavati. Do you believe this? M remained silent with wonder. He plucked one or two leaves from a branch in the Panchavati and put them in his pocket. Okay, now, this little section here, a very small little thing, is my favorite part of the whole Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. To me, this is the sweetest and most beautiful little incident in the whole thing. Whenever I read it, it's so touching. So, Master, see there, that branch has been broken. So let me read it again. He plucked one or two leaves from a branch in the Panchavati and put them in his pocket. Master, see there, that branch has been broken. I used to sit under it. M. I took a young twig from that tree. I have it at home. Master, with a smile. Why? M. I feel happy when I look at it. After all this is over, this place will be considered very holy. So this is really M is starting to understand this idea of lila. This idea of lila, that when the avatar comes, next thing you know, it's gone, it's all over. Thakur used to say I saw this one time, that there's a little band of bowls, Baladol, that they'll just show up someplace. They look a little strange. They'll sing and dance. They'll play this little ektara instrument and everything. You won't know where they came from. The next thing you know, they're gone. So Thakur used to say this is the avatar. It's like that. So M had some feeling that, yes, the next thing I know, it'll be over. What will I have to remind me of all of this? So we took that one twig. It's a very beautiful thing. So he said, I feel very happy when I look at it. After all this is over, this place will be considered very holy. Master, smiling. What kind of holy place? Like Panihati. Now, he could have said like Benares, but he says like Panihati, of course, compared to Dakshineswar, is very insignificant. During Thakur's time, for a certain class of people, for the Vaishnavas, it was a very holy place. Thakur went there every year, I don't know how many years in a row. Once a year, they would have a big festival there. And there's a couple of chapters on that, where there would be great kirtan. And when Thakur would go, immediately he would go into an ecstatic mood, and he would sing and dance for hours, and big crowds would come around and circle him and just to watch him and everything. And it was a tremendous sight. The last time he went, it rained. And this was right before Thakur developed the cancer, the sore in his throat. And he thought one idea that he had was that it was because he got soaking wet in the rain, and blamed Ram. He said, these young boys, they have no sense. But you're a little bit older. You should have known that not to let me stand out there singing, dancing, getting soaked in the rain. Everything. Of course, it had nothing to do with the rain. That it turned out to be the throat cancer and everything. But there's Panihati. So Thakur, a little bit of his innocence, that he's not thinking that, I'll be so famous, it'll be like Chaitanya Dev in Puri or Sri Krishna in Vrindavan. It'll be like this Panihati thing. But M is thinking, no, it'll be more than that. So what kind of holy place? Like Panihati. Almost every year for some time past, the master had been attending the religious festival at Panihati. It was evening. Sri Ramakrishna was sitting on the small couch in his room, absorbed in meditation on the Divine Mother. The evening worship in the temples began with the music of gong and conch shell. M was going to spend the night with the master. After a time, Sri Ramakrishna asked M to read from the Bhakta Mala, a book about the Vaishnava saints. M read. There was a king named Jayamal who loved Krishna with all his heart. He followed with unfailing devotion all the rites and ceremonies associated with the adoration of Krishna, whom he worshipped under the name of Shyamala Sundara. Completely satisfied with his own ideal deity, he never directed his attention to any other god or goddess. One of the inflexible rules of his devotion was to worship the deity daily till almost midday. He would never deviate from this practice, even at the risk of his wealth or his kingdom. Learning the secret, an enemy king invaded the kingdom during the morning hours. Jayamal's soldiers could not fight without his command, so they watched the invasion silently. Slowly, the enemy surrounded the moat of the capital, yet Jayamal did not come out of his shrine room. His mother came to him and wept bitterly, trying to persuade the king to fight. He said to her calmly, "Why are you worried? Shyamala Sundara gave me this kingdom. What can I do if he has decided to take it away? On the other hand, none will be able to do me harm if he protects me. Our own efforts are in vain." And actually, in the meantime, Shyamala Sundara, the deity himself, had taken the king's horse from the stable and had ridden fully armed on the field. Alone he faced the hostile king and alone destroyed his army. Having crushed the enemy forces, the deity returned to the temple and fastened the horse nearby. Jayamal, on completing his worship, came out and discovered the horse there, panting and covered with sweat. "Who has been riding my horse?" he demanded. "Who brought it to the temple?" The officers declared they knew nothing about it. In a pensive mood, the king proceeded to the battlefield with his army, and there found the enemy, with the exception of their leader, lying dead. He was staring uncomprehendingly at the scene when the enemy king approached, worshipped him, and said, "Please permit me to tell you something. How could I fight? You have a warrior who could conquer the entire world. I do not want your wealth or your kingdom. Indeed, I will gladly give you my own if you will tell me about the blue warrior, your friend." No sooner did I turn my eyes on him than he cast a spell on my heart and soul. Jayamal then realized it had been none other than Shyamala Sundara that had appeared on the battlefield. The enemy king understood too. He worshipped Jayamal and through his blessings received Krishna's grace. Now, Thakur is going to test him. This is very interesting. Master, do you believe all that? Do you believe Krishna rode on that horse and killed Jayamal's enemies? Now remember, there's M, highly scientific mind, highly historical mind, highly logical mind that studied all of the Western logic and other things. What's he going to answer? So he gives an interesting answer. I believe that Jayamal, Krishna's devotee, prayed to him with a yearning heart. Okay, we can accept that. But I don't know whether the enemy really saw him coming to the battlefield on a horse. Krishna might have come there riding the horse, but I do not know whether they really saw him. A very strange answer. And I wonder sometimes how honest M was. Maybe he was afraid to simply say, "No, I don't believe any of it." Or maybe he's thinking now that now I've seen Sri Ramakrishna, I know that anything is possible with God. We don't know what's in his mind. But Thakur turns out to be smarter than everybody. This is very interesting. With a smile, he says, "The book contains nice stories about devotees, but it is one-sided." So basically he's saying, don't take these things too literally. Just for the devotees, for devotion and everything. But it's one-sided. Also, it abuses those who differ with its views. The following morning, the master and M were talking in the garden. M, "Then I shall stay here." Master, "Well, you all come here so often." He was going to spend the night. "What does it mean?" People visit a holy man once at most, but you all come here so often. What is the significance of that? M remained silent. The master himself gave the reply. Master, could you come here unless you belong to my inner circle? So we have this idea of these Ishvara kotis. These will be those who are already perfect. We don't know the real distinction between all of these things. Anyhow, the term used here is antaranga. These antarangas, whether it's their first birth with Thakur or they've come before, whatever it is, they're essential to this lila, and Thakur considers them as his very own. So could you come here unless you belong to my inner circle? That means you are all my own relatives, my own people, like father and son, brother and sister. I do not tell you everything. If I did, would you come here anymore? He has his role to play. There's he has his nirvikalpa samadhi. Who's going to write down everything? Once Shukadeva went to Janaka to be instructed in the knowledge of Brahman. Janaka said, "First give me my fee." But, said Shukadeva, "Why should I give you the fee before receiving the instruction?" Janaka laughed and said, "Will you be conscious of guru and disciple after attaining Brahmajnana? That is why I ask you to give me the fee first." It was night. The moon rose, flooding all the quarters with its silvery light. M was walking alone in the garden of the temple. On one side of the path stood the Panchavati, the Bakul Grove, the Nahabad, and the master's room, and on the other side flowed the Ganges, reflecting millions of broken moons on its rippling surface. M said to himself, "Can one really see God?" The master says it is possible. He says that if one makes a little effort, then someone comes forward and shows the way. Well, I am married, I have children. Can one realize God in spite of all that? M reflected a while and continued his soliloquy. Surely one can. Otherwise, why should the master say so? Why shouldn't it be possible through the grace of God? Here is the world around me, the sun, moon, stars, living beings, and the 24 cosmic principles. How did they come into existence? Who is their creator? Who am I to him? Life is indeed vain without this knowledge. Sri Ramakrishna is certainly the best of men. In all my life, I've not seen another great soul like him. He must have seen God. Otherwise, how could he talk with God day and night, addressing him so intimately as mother? Otherwise, how could he love God so intimately? Such is his love for God that he forgets the outer world. He goes into samadhi and remains like a lifeless thing. Again, in the ecstasy of that love, he laughs and cries and dances and sings. And that's the end of that day. Om Niranjanam Nityamanandarupam Bhaktanukham Bhatadavikraham Vade Ishavataram Parameshamidhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namama. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Oh, come. End?
Yeah.
End stream? Not yet. End.
And
End.